You are now tuning in to Youth Voices Amplified, a podcast production from the Community Enrichment Project, a youth civic engagement nonprofit in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jakira Williams, and I'm a 21-year-old recent college grad. I'm here with my co-host, Zakiya Johnson, and we're both digital media interns with the Community Enrichment Project, CEP for short.
Hi, as she said, I'm Zakiya. I'm 18, and I just recently graduated from School Without Walls Senior High School.
So today, as I mentioned, we're the digital media interns with the CEP, and we're here to provide a variety of interest-based learning and engagement programs that will help teach the importance of advocacy, voting, and volunteering activism to the youth. The CEP's programs are designed to emphasize the importance of civic engagement to youth and stress how they can become pillars of change in their communities. So today, Zakiya and I are here to shed light on how childhood trauma can affect one's interpersonal connections in the future. But first, before we dive straight in, let's define childhood trauma. So childhood trauma is the experience of single or multiple events by a child that is emotionally painful or distressful. This experience often leads to serious lifelong damages to one's physical and mental health and psyche. The U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health recorded in 2018 that every year in high-income countries, about 4 to 16% of children are experiencing physical abuse, and 1 in 10 is neglected or psychologically abused. This abuse can turn into serious trauma for a child and can manifest into self-loathing and believing that one is not good enough or will never amount to anything. Psych Central conducted a survey using a group of 555 university students. They used a variety of surveys and questionnaires. For example, they used the childhood trauma questionnaire, the self-rating depression scale, self-rating anxiety scale, as well as the social support rating scale. The results were very astonishing. 18.6% of university students had reported childhood trauma exposures. This psychological turmoil is exactly what leads to high depression and suicide rates in young kids around America, especially in youth of color. So why is this the case? And furthermore, why is it that older generations fail to heal from their trauma?
Personally, I feel that this happens a lot because of the avoidance of talking about mental health in the home. There's so many times when I've heard from my friends or my own experiences when mental health is not acknowledged at home, or even worse, not considered seriously. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the study showed that about 63% of Black people view mental illness as a personal weakness. There's this negative stigma in the Black community that if you show any signs of what is perceived as a weakness, you're not doing something right. The number of times I've unironically heard elders in our community say, Black people don't get depressed, or that mental health stuff is for white people. And it's so crazy to me. And even more on that, I feel like this stigma is created with older folks in the community just because there's that mistrust between our people and the healthcare system. For hundreds of years, Black people have been discriminated against in hospitals. Racism in the healthcare system is very real. We're told that we're over-exaggerating or that nothing is wrong with us and we're strong and we're fine. So then people go home, they believe that things are fine, but then they turn a turn for the worse. For example, the Henrietta Lacks story. She came into the hospital after years of not wanting to go just because, as any other Black person in that time, she was afraid to go to a white hospital. She was checked for cervical cancer, had her famous cells stolen from her, and sent home with a little done for her. Then years later, you see how doctors reap the benefits without giving any compensation to the Lacks family. There's a reason why there's a mistrust of doctors, and it even gets pushed to the home where mental health is completely diminished and looked down on. But it's so crucial that these support systems are made for people who are experiencing mental health issues, even if young people don't feel comfortable expressing it in their homes. So my question to you, Jakira, is how can those who have been traumatized by their family feel comfortable enough to reach out? And what tools do the youth have access to?
I definitely feel you on that. I feel like the best way for us to combat this is by using social support. I feel like it's important for us to emphasize the importance of communicating with our kids and discussing with our family members, children, parents, grandparents, the importance of our emotions and how we're feeling about certain issues that occur to us, whether in our adolescence or even as adults. I feel like if we take this time to discuss mental health and wrap our arms around our youth and tell them that it's okay to feel what they're feeling and to not negate their feelings and invalidate them, I feel like the childhood trauma rates will diminish. And I feel like a lot of people will be more emotionally intelligent. I feel like by doing this act of being socially supportive and normalizing the importance of communicating our emotions and being emotionally intelligent, we could combat childhood trauma. What do you think, Z?
I definitely agree with you, and especially the fact that you said to like hug on everybody. Like even if you aren't necessarily close with someone, just like checking up on them or just checking up on your sibling every now and then, just like popping your head in, saying hi. Words of affirmation are definitely important, just because not everyone may get that. Like you don't understand how far just a hug from someone can go. That can really brighten someone's entire day. Just small things like that. Just little texts like, oh, I'm just checking up on you. How are you? How's your day? How's your week? Small things like that are definitely the first steps to making people feel safe and feel like they have somewhere where they belong and where they can have an outlet and they can talk about how they feel and these emotions.
I agree. And I feel like as well as being, there emotionally and physically, we also need to normalize the importance of communicating our emotions and being emotionally intelligent. Like I believe when we were discussing earlier, when we were like thinking about the topic for this podcast today, we discussed how mental health is such a taboo topic in the Black community. And I just don't understand why. Like, why do you think that's the issue plaguing our community right now?
I definitely feel like it's an issue that plagues our community just because, like I said before, the mistrust, and then also like the way that it's treated in our community. Like I was talking about, like I said before in our conversation, how mental health concerns in Black families are treated two different ways based off of sex. Mm-hmm. So women are exposed to emotions differently than men are, in the same way men are exposed differently. Like traditionally, men are told that they're supposed to be manly, they're not allowed to cry because crying is a sign of weakness, and they don't want to be weak, they don't want to be perceived like a girl, blah, 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 etc. And all these things just lead to emotional constipation. And this is just thanks to toxic masculinity, which is the notion that manliness perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they feel like they aren't allowed to be themselves, they aren't allowed to cry, they aren't allowed to have bad days, they aren't allowed to feel sad, simply because it would make them less of a man, definitely leads them to just hold everything in and to blow up later. And we don't want that. Of course we don't want that. We want anyone to feel like they should have an outlet. They want to feel comfortable, So the fact that this is such a thing that's ingrained in our society, it's really hurtful to our community. And then on the other hand, when it comes to women, they're allowed to exhibit their emotions. They're allowed to process their emotions. However, if a woman is to show too many emotions, then they're being seen as too emotional. Like if you're upset about something as a Black woman, you also get the label of being an angry Black woman. Or if you're being too sad or sensitive about something else, then you need to have tougher skin. And at the same time, while women are held to these expectations of being allowed to be emotional, but not too emotional, they're also forced to have a nurturing and caring role for other people in their community. So while they have to balance their own emotions and keep their own things at bay, they also have to help, whether that be as an older sister, helping your younger siblings in the house if your parents aren't available, or just taking care of other people in your life. It's usually just something that they're expected to do, and it's very stifling and it can be very toxic. So something I'm wondering is, how do we break out of these harmful stereotypes?
No, I definitely agree. And I feel like I don't know if it's just me, and correct me if I'm wrong. I've been around a couple of I have a lot of guy cousins, and they're very young and naive in the mind. And I will hear them saying offensive things. So I've been around my guy cousin, and when he's with his friends, we'll be on FaceTime, he's with his friends, and one of them may say something that's like emotional, like, man, that just hurt my feelings or something like that. And one of his friends' response would be, man, that's gay. Why are you out here acting like you're sad and emotional? And I had to correct one of my cousin's friends saying, hey, to show emotion and to communicate how you're feeling does not dictate your sexual orientation and what you seek in a partner. And to correlate the two is both arrogant and disrespectful to those who identify in that community. And I feel like a lot of our generation is just told that it's not, well, the men in particular are told that it's not okay to express emotions without being seen as feminine or overly feminine, because I feel like it's great for a guy to have feminine qualities, just such as being compassionate and understanding and emotionally intelligent. But also, like you said, women are then forced to take on this narrative of being the nurturer, and we have to make sure that everyone else is okay before we're okay. And I feel like that's toxic in and of itself, both to the women that's forced to put on these roles and portray these roles, and to the overall society and how we view women. I feel like it's hard for us to draw the line between having emotional intelligence and or being too emotional. And like you mentioned, if you're having a bad day or if you're just frustrated or annoyed at something that's, you could be very well valid for being frustrated and annoyed for, you're then dictated or presented as this aggressor or the angry Black woman, when you're just trying to advocate how someone's actions or words have made you feel, and then in turn you're taught to think that your feelings aren't valid and that you should bottle them in. And I feel like the first step in combating this would be understanding and normalizing the conversation that it's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, but it's not okay to not communicate how you're feeling and to bottle that inside, because that then in turn turns into a traumatic experience for you, because you're never able to convey how you're feeling or convey those problems that are eating away at you. Instead, you're just keeping it inside and you have no one to talk to about it. So then you're going to turn into probably self-loathing. If you had questions about your identity, you weren't able to express that, or your emotions weren't able to express that, turn into feeling like you're not good enough, or you're an outsider who doesn't really fit in with societal norms. I feel like the best way for us to do this is to change the narrative. I feel like once we normalize the importance of mental health, emotional intelligence, and communicating, I feel like so many things will be solved in the society that we live in today. And I feel like we'll be able to break childhood trauma and generational curses if we continue to normalize and continue to push against the negative stigmas of that men need to be manly and not show emotions, and women need to be nurturers and not show too many emotions. I feel like once we allow for people to feel how they feel and provide them the safe space to do so, we will be a better society, a society filled with empaths who understand what the other person is going through, who's able to communicate what they're going through, to better give them advice on what to do in their situations, or how to make them feel better after they express their disconcern or their feelings of not being heard. I feel like it's important for us to normalize our emotions and communicating our emotions. But I feel like it's also easier said than done as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I just feel like the way that this would happen is the younger generation would have to take that into their hands, because it's harder to try to change someone's mind who's been thinking this way for, 30, 40, 50 years versus making sure younger people understand, okay, it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to not feel happy sometimes. It's okay to have bad slumps, just like talk to them about different emotions that you may experience to make sure that they do have this emotional intelligence instilled in them as they're growing up. It's definitely more important, to me at least, to make sure that the younger generation is understanding these things so that they don't have to try to heal themselves from this trauma later on. I feel like it's easier to attack the problem now versus years later.
Mm-hmm. And I also, just to go off what you said briefly, I feel like with the older generations who feel set in their ways, I feel like we shouldn't be complacent in the fact that we shouldn't be complacent in their complacency. I feel like we need to kind of push the barrier and say, hey, your way of thinking is outdated, and no, it's not okay, and it's having this negative effect on me. I would really appreciate it if you could communicate with me in a better way. If you don't feel like you can do that, I'm also open to us having group therapy sessions. I'm a firm believer in therapy, and I feel like therapy, with newer generations, I feel like in the Black community, we're more open to it, and I feel like we're actually are the ones who are advocating for therapy. And I feel like we're trying to convince older generations to do so as well. But I feel like older generations are a little more reserved. And as you mentioned earlier, I feel like older generations are more so like, we don't have therapy in the Black community. If you have a problem, you solve it with your family. Or we don't have mental health issues. If it's a problem, solve it with yourself or your family. And I feel like we never get at the root of these issues because we never dig deep. And it's some fault to us, but also we don't have all the tools to do so. And that's when we're supposed to outsource to these people who have been to school for this and have training in this to help us solve these childhood traumas, and to also help our parents solve these childhood traumas, and our grandparents solve these childhood traumas, and our great-grandparents solve these childhood traumas. I feel like therapy is so taboo in older generations, but in this newer generation, we're all gung-ho about it. We're like, yes, let's fix these issues. I have mental health issues. I want to fix them. I don't want to keep living like this. I want to be mentally healthy. I want to be physically healthy. I want to make better relationships. I want to form better interpersonal relationships and connections. So in order to do so, I'm willing to put that work in. And I feel like once we normalize mental health and being emotionally intelligent, maybe older generations will feel more comfortable going to another person, an outside party who's trained in this, to help them solve their own childhood trauma, because you can't expect someone to understand yours when they don't understand their own. So I definitely feel like therapy could be a great resource for people of color and people who go through childhood trauma in general.
I definitely agree with you. I definitely feel like, just like you said, therapy is really underrated. Like, I feel like everyone, even if you are neurodivergent or neurotypical, should at least experience some form of therapy at least once in their lives, just because it's so helpful to have someone else to talk to about your problems or your issues or whatever you're facing. But I feel like the taboo around therapy definitely comes from the shame-based culture that's usually seen in Black communities. Like, a lot of times, if something were to happen in the home, they don't really want it to get out just because they're afraid of what other people may think. Like, and that also comes with like denying mental health. Like, some people think, I don't want people to know my son as being the one with depression, or I don't want my daughter being known as the person with anxiety, things like that. So then it just creates them to deny the fact altogether. And it's really harmful then, because denying it doesn't make it go away. It just makes it disappear to you, but the problem is definitely still there. The people still experience that depression, they still experience that anxiety, etc., any other mental illness. So the fact that people are more worried about what other people think rather than the actual issue at hand, that's something that definitely is instilled in the Black community. And I just feel like you should be more worried about the safety of your child than what someone else who isn't in your house thinks. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd rather make sure that, okay, my kid feels safe in the home. How can I cater to them to make sure that they're receiving all the care that they need? You know, like, what other tools do they need? Do they need therapy? Do they need to, get medicated? Do they need, etc.? Like, all these things, they need to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. All of that. I feel like that's definitely the most important step. However, with older generations, because of the shame-based culture that we have as a Black community, it's not looked at the same way, because they don't want to be seen as a family who experiences this or goes through this. Mm-hmm. I just feel like we need to, I just feel like we need to get rid of that level of thinking. What were you going to say?
I definitely agree. And I think you hit it on the nose when you said it's all about being vulnerable. I think we as Black people has had to be guarded, and like you said earlier, we're not as trusting, especially when it comes to health hospitals and like the healthcare field in general. We don't really trust the government. We don't even trust our family members sometimes to be able to talk to them about these issues we're facing. And I think it's because, like you said, we have a hard time being vulnerable. And I feel like it's easier said than done to just let down your walls. But again, therapy helps with that. But also, someone has to be worthy of receiving that vulnerable side of you. And I feel like that's why we need to, like, kind of not force, but really encourage our older generations, like our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, to seek that help as well. Because who's going to feel comfortable voicing their vulnerability and all they're going through when the person on the receiving end is judging them or is negating their feelings and invalidating their experiences. I wouldn't want to be vulnerable in that situation as either. I feel like it's only right for us, if we're going to be vulnerable, to have to do that work, and so that when we're being vulnerable, we feel like it's a safe space to do so. Because it's hard to break down those walls and those barriers if you're going to be greeted with a brick wall for someone who can't convey their emotions or how what you're saying or your emotions made them feel. So I feel like it all roots back to wanting to do the work and being trusting in someone to help you out. For like, I know as Black people, we don't trust and we're not as trusting, but there's Black therapists out there. There's your kinfolk out there who understands what you're going through, who's been in similar shoes as you and wants to help you work through those dilemmas. And they're out here, and I think we're not utilizing them. And I feel like that's the key to success, and that's the key to us becoming emotionally intelligent and normalizing discussion of mental health, is being able to converse with these individuals who've experienced similar hardship and adversities to give us advice. And then I know for me, I started therapy maybe a year ago, and it has helped me solve so many childhood traumas, and it brought so many to the surface that I didn't know I was dealing with subconsciously. And it's made me overall a better person. And I feel like my mental health has grown tremendously since attending therapy. And I have a Black therapist, and she gets it. Like, sometimes I'm not able to formulate sentences that convey how I'm feeling, and she's able to jump in there and provide me with things that she thinks I'm thinking or feeling. And they always, like 99% of the time, are always what I'm feeling. I just couldn't formulate it into words. And that's the importance of having a therapist or someone who understands what you're going through and been in similar shoes, and who is trained to know how to help you through that. So I'm just such an advocate for a therapist and breaking generational curses and childhood trauma via someone who's been in a similar situation as you, and who has experienced it and knows how they can help and wants to listen. And then once you have those tools, you'll start to learn that Mom may not be able to understand what I'm going through because she has her own childhood trauma she hasn't addressed. And I can't fault her for that. Although it may hurt me at times, I still love her. But I'm going to keep advocating for her to get out there and try to find someone to help her through that, because I know I'm not trained, or grandma may not have those tools or had those tools or had someone to even talk to if she felt any kind of way about having to take on that nurturing role at a young age. But now we do have those resources, and just letting her know that even if she doesn't want them, they're here for her when she is ready. So just like normalizing that conversation of being emotionally intelligent, normalizing the importance of taking care of our mental health, normalizing the importance of breaking these childhood traumas is the best way to go about becoming better humans and becoming better children, better spouses, better parents, better grandparents. And I feel like that's all we really can do, is try to be better, if not for others, for yourself. And I feel like the best way to do so is by taking care of your mental health and tackling those childhood traumas head on.
Yes, I agree with everything you said, especially the part with finding a therapist that like speaks to you. That resonated with me the most, because therapy is only as helpful if you have someone who understands your struggles. Like, you can't, as a Black woman, really expect to have the same level of understanding with a white male therapist that you would with another Black woman therapist, you know? So that's definitely an important step to having your childhood trauma addressed. And then also, like what you said, I feel like when it comes to the older generation, even if you try to sit down and have that conversation with them and they aren't necessarily open to it, you just have to say, okay, you know, like, you have to accept the fact that they may not be on that level. They may not be ready to listen to what you have to say. And you can't really control that. You know, you just have to accept that that's the way it is. And it can hurt. Like you said, it will hurt at times. However, you have to realize that you also need to make sure you're doing what's best for yourself. So you cannot necessarily make someone heal themselves. So because you cannot make someone heal themselves, you need to make sure at least you're healing yourself.
That's true.
I definitely feel like that's the most important part of getting through your childhood trauma. You can't really fix everything that's happened to you. Like, even if, you know, you've grown up and you haven't had a good relationship with your mom or with your dad, and then after you start seeing a therapist, you're like, okay, well, maybe I can try to fix things, and it doesn't work out. Okay, you know, at least you unearthed that. At least you worked through it. At least you talked to somebody about that. You can't necessarily always accept things to work out for the better. But in the end, just because you have clarity on that issue, I feel like that's better than what things were like before.
Exactly. And then once you have clarity on the issue, you're able to help yourself, and you're able to draw those boundaries with your friends and your family members. Like, okay, if you're not going to get the help, I'm going to love you from afar, because loving you up close and personal is taking a toll on me. And at the end of the day, I know that I need to make sure that I'm okay mentally, and I'm trying to teach you everything I'm learning when I'm in therapy, or teaching you everything I'm learning while doing the work and the shadow work to fix myself and to heal these childhood traumas that I've experienced. But if you're not going to take that push to do so, I refuse to stay in this relationship if that's hindering me and my mental health, because you're refusing to seek help. So also knowing to draw those boundaries with people that you love, whether it's family, friends, or loved ones, knowing that I have to prioritize my mental health and my sanity over anyone else's. Although I'm here for you when you're ready to learn and ready to heal, I'll definitely be here to support you. And like I said earlier, providing that social support. However, if it means diminishing my mental health and my emotional intelligence in the process, I refuse to do so. So I will take a step back. And knowing that it's okay to take a step back from people that you love in order to make sure that your mental health is secure.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree with you. And then I just feel like that goes back to where, when we were saying that shame-based culture, some people feel like they're too afraid to necessarily step back from loving somebody. Not even like just to, after those conversations and they don't work out for you, to be like, okay, well, maybe I will create some distance between us just because, you know, this isn't necessarily what's best for me at this time. A lot of people are afraid to do that and afraid to advocate for themselves just because of the shame-based culture. And, oh, what would people think if I was kind of estranged from my family? What would people think if I wasn't necessarily close, or I didn't come home all the time and I didn't really talk to my parents and I didn't have that relationship with my parents? But at the same time, you need to worry about, like you said, what's best for yourself. So if that means that, okay, I may not talk to my mom, or I may not talk to my dad, I may not talk to grandma all the time, if that's what you need to do to make sure that you're receiving the best mental health care that you need, then you shouldn't be afraid to do that. I definitely feel like you have to make sure that you're always advocating for yourself in all these situations. And then that just leads me also to the question, how do we make sure that we don't fail future generations in terms of addressing childhood trauma and other mental health care issues?
I feel like the way that we can better support future generations and make sure we don't fail them is by letting them know that it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to have mental health issues. It's okay to want to seek help for these issues. It's okay to feel how you're feeling. I feel like once you start invalidating their feelings or telling them how they should feel in situations and how they shouldn't feel, then you're telling them that their voice doesn't matter and what they're feeling doesn't matter and that they should just suck it up. So I feel like the best way to make sure we're not failing future generations is to support them in their journey of finding emotional intelligence and in their journey of figuring out how to have the best mental health, and just supporting them and giving them that social support and also that physical love and words of affirmation to let them know that I'm here for you, I hear you, you're loved. And I feel like the new generation we're taking this theory by storm. We're out here doing the work, shadow work, healing, all of it to make sure that we're not failing future generations. We don't want our kids to have to go through what we went through, or what our parents went through, or what our grandparents or great-grandparents had to go through. We're trying to break these generational curses. We're trying to break these childhood traumas, cycles. We're just trying to be overall better people so that in turn we can make overall better humans, you know? So that's what I'm thinking. What do you think?
I definitely agree with you on that. And I also feel like it's important just to, a lot of times I feel like youth and younger people in general, their emotions are kind of cast to the side or not taken seriously just because of the fact that they're young. But young people have some of the most, like, they can be some of the most emotional, yes, some of the most emotionally intelligent people I could meet. And I feel like that's definitely something that gets lost as they grow up, just because they're told that they shouldn't be that way, or they aren't necessarily, I don't know, I guess that part of them doesn't get the care and the receive that it should get. So I feel like as long as we make sure to cater to that and to talk to them about their emotional intelligence, to make sure that they understand that it's good to be emotionally intelligent and it's good to be able to talk about your emotions. It's good to be vulnerable to those around you and those that are supporting you, and just always advocate for yourself. These things, make sure that they know that these things are important, and to make sure that they feel like they can be comfortable to come to me and be like, okay, I'm experiencing this, and I think this, and have these conversations. All of that is important. All of those are how we make sure that we don't fail future generations. We need to make sure that they just know it's okay to talk about these things and to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the best way to do so is providing platforms such as the one that we're doing right now with this podcast via the Community Enrichment Project, and just providing these safe spaces where people can come and talk and just voice their concern about what's plaguing the Black community. Thank you so much, Zakia, for being my co-host today. I feel like you dropped a lot of gems on us and you provided us with a lot of wisdom, especially for you to be so young. It's really been a pleasure having you as my co-host.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for having this conversation with me. I definitely found it to be very thought-provoking, and I learned a lot today.
Well, if we don't have anything else to add, I want to bid you all adieu. Have a good one, everyone.